weapons dealing, and so forth. And so the Giller Prize, which is an extremely rich prize in Canada, winner gets $100,000. Happened, and like half the writers are boycotting the gala, and half the writers are shamefacedly attending. So I think this poem engages with a lot of that kind of question about establishment, like literary writing. Okay.
Nice.
How to write a settler poem. Write about nature, never about land. Land is political. Land might lead to critical thoughts of land claims, and we just want poems about the rain or how we tamed the wilderness, not about treaty rights or fracking or who stole this land anyway, because that might lead to unpleasant. And what are we supposed to do? Just give it all back? So let's just write about following the tracks into the undergrowth in both official languages, because Indigenous languages don't qualify for the Governor General's Award. And we just can't afford to think about all those places with Indigenous names, like, for example, Canada. Definitely avoid poems about race. They don't give awards to poetry that inflames. Acclaimed Canadian poetry is a poetry that makes us feel safe. Avoid anything that's contemporary or relevant. The words oppression or white privilege just aren't poetic or elegant. And after all, Canadian poetry should make you feel benevolent. Like, I'm a good progressive white Canadian and I'm poetry that can be read on CBC and makes you feel intellectual. Being a poetry reader should ideally know it's respectable if it's boring and in a Canadian poetry is for settlers. That's why Canada loves nature poems, because nature is that open sweep of empty space with no inconvenient Indians, and poetry really should be empty of opinions. Otherwise, isn't it just a rant? Canadian poetry should evoke a pre-colonial fantasy where it's just settlers against the land, and nature is threatening and dangerous until it's taken in hand and conquered existentially by a single pioneering white man. After all, isn't that how Canada began? Poetry by Indigenous people should allow you to place them firmly in the past. It's so sad how those people just can't keep up with a modern world that's just too fast. Such a gentle people, really. Should probably appropriate some Indigenous. After all, famous white, everybody after all. That is, until you violate white copyright. But we just do folk art, so we can't be plagiarized. Our ideas and style are available for free. We're not intellectual or anything. It just comes to us naturally. Real poetry is deep. Poetry is spiritual, which means it puts you to sleep. Real poetry should be individual. Real poetry is just it should be about reflecting on your personal life journey, be about social justice or collective liberation, because isn't that just writing in a box? Isn't that simplistic? Not sophisticated like poetry about the cottage. Poetry by people of color is okay as long as it's exotic. Write about spices. White people love that local flavor. Don't write about the racist immigration point system or the exploitation of third world labor. Just write about your grandmother's wisdom or colorful market behavior. White people should feel like they're an expert on your culture after reading your poems so that they can play savior. Throw in a couple of words in your language as long as you speak English when you're around your neighbors. Don't get carried away. Remember, poetry is civilized. Poetry is quiet and white, just like nature. Nature is the opposite of urban, which is a synonym for black, and that means hip hop and slang and loud, and Canadian listeners just don't like that. We just want to hear Baroque music and balmy white voices at your grandmother's farm. Nature is white and calm. Nature is, I get to own a second home in the country, but I'm sophisticated and educated, not like those rural folk. Nature is, I get to fantasize about being authentic and getting rid of technology, but not because I'm broke. Nature is, I can give up what I have when I feel like it, just for fun or a joke. It's not rural poverty or drug addiction or the loss of industry. It's water skiing and campfire smoke. Nature is quiet nights at the cottage with nothing but the sounds of the loons. And loons are on the loony, so that's government approved as an image of Canada. Loons are soothing. Really, if you write a Canadian poem and you can't record it over the sounds of loons, then is that really worth producing? If you're not writing about nature in Canada, then what are you really doing? Write about loons and not about the Black people they're removing or describing the bruising from police brutality or how Bill C-51 is attacking our privacy. Write about the lake. Don't write about how we take water from the lakes we vacation on while the reserves who own the lake have to boil before drinking advisories. Write poetry that's already dead and buried in the libraries. Write about that time you saw a deer, not about how, say, Canadian companies profit off oil in Nigeria. If you're Black, write an update of Shakespeare. That will make white people feel like you're intelligent and like you admit white culture is superior. That makes them think you're literate and not like those rappers. Remember, they don't know Black people can actually read books with chapters. Write a tribute to Leonard Cohen or the Group of Seven or even William Shatner. Definitely don't write poems about the Toronto Raptors. Write about the white spruce or the white fir or the white pine. That's why we write about nature in Canada, because nature is colorblind.